The wind whispered low across the fields of Yakima Valley, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant pine. A lone figure moved along the edge of the orchard, hands tucked deep into coat pockets, eyes scanning the horizon where sunlight stretched thin across the ridges. Somewhere beyond the trees, a river murmured against its banks, a quiet rhythm that spoke of life and patience. The world seemed paused, waiting, as if it too held its breath. In this stillness, stories began, untold and unhurried, ready to unfold. Subscribe to Dust and Devotion Tales to follow the journey, where quiet lives and hearts quietly brave meet. The morning light spilled across the rolling hills of Yakima Valley, soft mist clinging to the orchard trees. Clara Whitmore stepped onto the porch of her small cabin, the wood warm beneath her boots. The scent of wet earth and early blossoms filled the air. She moved with deliberate care, checking the fences and gates, ensuring her land remained secure. Months of solitude had honed her routine, each task measured, each motion intentional. She fed the animals and repaired a sagging fence post, noting how the sunlight scattered across the orchard rows. The rhythm of work grounded her, offering a quiet steadiness after the loss of her family. Pausing, she traced the distant ridges where the land fell into valleys and streams, feeling both the weight of isolation and the comfort of familiarity. By midday, the air had warmed, carrying the buzz of insects and the faint sweetness of blossoms. She ate a simple lunch on the porch, watching the land, when a thin curl of smoke appeared on the horizon. She studied it, cautious, the sight stirring a subtle tension she hadn't felt in months. As afternoon deepened, Clara returned to the barn to check on the animals. The mule had dragged a rope across the ground, a minor disruption in her orderly life. She straightened it, letting each careful movement reinforce the sense of control she relied on. The day faded into gold and amber light, and she secured the animals for the night, feeling the first chill of spring in the valley. Evening settled with a deep quiet, the orchard alive with nocturnal sounds and wind through the trees. Clara sat by the window, hands wrapped around a cup of tea, gazing at the hills under a sky scattered with stars. The earlier smoke had vanished, leaving questions and a faint sense of anticipation. The land was alive, breathing, waiting. She prepared for sleep with her usual care, checking locks and closing shutters, letting the rhythm of the land guide her. Walking once more to the cabin door, she peered into the darkness. The valley stretched endlessly, and though uncertainty lingered, a spark of curiosity stirred. Whatever lay ahead, she would meet it with the same careful determination that had carried her through the months of solitude. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and rain, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a quiet hope for the days to come. The morning light stretched over the wide Nebraska plains, soft gold spilling across the gently rolling hills. The air smelled of damp earth and fresh grass, carrying both the promise of spring and the weight of tasks waiting to be done. Sarah moved through her small homestead with quiet precision, tending to the animals and checking fences, her hands steady and sure. The cabin behind her stood weathered but steadfast, timber darkened by sun and wind, the roof patched where storms had tested it. She paused by the well, letting the cool water run through her hands, listening to the subtle hum of the prairie, the wind bending the grass in gentle waves. She began her morning chores, chopping wood with rhythmic care, each swing a small conversation with the land, a reminder that she could shape her world through effort and attention. The sun climbed higher, carrying the scent of smoke from distant fields, and the quiet whinny of her horse stirred a sense of continuity, a connection to the life she had built alone. Her mind drifted briefly to the visitor from the previous day, the way his calm presence had filled the spaces she had long inhabited in solitude. By mid-morning, breakfast was prepared. A simple meal of eggs and cornmeal porridge. Steam rose in gentle spirals, mingling with the scent of wildflowers carried on the wind. She sat briefly, letting her hands rest on the table, listening to the soft rustle of birds in the underbrush. The rhythm of the day was steady, each small task flowing into the next, the repetition comforting yet demanding, a steady beat like the pulse of the land itself. After breakfast, Sarah saddled her horse and rode toward the eastern boundary, the terrain rising in soft hills dotted with wild plum trees and scattered rocks. She guided the horse with gentle pressure, following a path etched through the prairie, noticing small changes in the land, the widening of the creek, impressions of animal tracks, shifts in soil from overnight rain. Every observation mattered. Every detail was a piece of the life she had chosen, a lesson in understanding the world around her. She reached the grove by late morning, sunlight filtering through branches, illuminating clusters of pale blossoms. She dismounted and walked among the trees, fingertips brushing petals, inhaling the faint fragrance of spring. The grove offered a rare pause, a moment of quiet reflection, and she let herself feel the subtle echo of the visitor's presence, a lingering warmth, like sunlight on her shoulders. Returning to the cabin, she discovered a letter pinned to the doorpost, the neat handwriting familiar. The note promised help with the northern fence in a few days, a small gesture that reminded her she was not entirely alone. The afternoon passed in a steady rhythm of labor and observation. She tended the garden, adjusted supports for seedlings, pulled weeds, and examined the soil. The sun rose and fell, casting long shadows across the yard, and the cabin seemed to breathe with a quiet, dependable life. Chickens scratched in the dirt, the mule shifted lazily, and the air was alive with small, meaningful sounds that marked the passing day. As evening approached, Sarah built a fire outside, the scent of burning wood mingling with twilight. She stirred a simple stew, listening to coyotes call from the distant hills and the soft murmur of wind through the prairie grass. The sky deepened to violet and navy, first stars appearing. She paused, taking in the expanse, letting the quiet settle around her, and thought of the visitor again, imagining his steady presence moving through the same world, a reminder that connection could arrive gently, without demand. Night fell fully, the prairie alive with nocturnal sounds. Sarah returned to the cabin, closed the door against the chill, and prepared tools for the next day. She lingered by the lamp, thinking of yesterday, of how small gestures could shift a life, of how patience and attention could build trust slowly, like the careful work she gave her land each day. Sleep came gradually, the air carrying a faint warmth from the fire, the wind through the grass, and the unspoken promise that tomorrow would bring continuation, labor, quiet hope, and the possibility of a presence that might linger. The morning sun sped soft gold across the Nebraska plains, touching the hills and the winding creek. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of thawing soil and new grass. Sarah stepped onto the porch, her eyes scanning the cabin and surrounding fields. Each fence post and tree, a reminder of months spent alone, of work done in silence. The prairie moved quietly around her, alive in small signs. The distant call of a hawk, the rustle of reeds, the glint of sunlight on the water. She started with the fences, checking for weaknesses from the winter storms. Her hands moved deliberately, inspecting each post and securing every strand of wire. Tracks in the soft soil drew her attention. Rabbit, coyote, something larger, but nothing threatened the livestock. She paused to trace the signs briefly, her senses alert yet calm, absorbing the rhythm of the land she had built for herself. Every careful movement was grounding, every observation a quiet triumph over solitude. Breakfast followed, simple and unhurried. Eggs from the coop, porridge with a touch of honey. She ate alone, but not lonely. Her thoughts drifted to the visitor who had come the previous week. His steady hands, patient presence, and quiet strength lingered in her mind, a reminder that connection could arrive slowly, in measured gestures and shared tasks. She let the warmth of that thought settle, savoring the sense of trust it carried, like the lingering taste of morning coffee. By mid-morning, she saddled her horse and rode toward the wild plum grove near the creek. The blossoms softened the land with pale pinks, petals swaying in the breeze. She dismounted, letting the grove's quiet wrap around her. Time slowed here, narrowed to the brush of leaves, the soft ripple of water, and the clop of distant hoofs. She tended the soil, checked the water flow, and moved fallen branches, each motion deliberate, connecting her to the land and its steady rhythm. The afternoon sun drew her back to chores, repairing the fence near the garden, clearing weeds, filling the troughs. Sweat dampened her brow, marking progress, each task a measure of care and effort. The prairie whispered softly around her, the rustle of grasses, the distant song of birds. As evening fell, she returned home, stacked firewood, and prepared a simple stew, letting the day fade slowly across the horizon. Night brought stillness. Stars glittered over the homestead as Sarah lit a lantern, its glow reflecting on the wooden walls. She paused to take in the quiet rhythm of her life, the settled animals, the crackling fire, the wind in budding trees. Thoughts of the visitor returned, subtle yet warm, a reminder that connection was possible, even in solitude. She stepped outside one last time, breathing in the crisp night air. The prairie lay still beneath the stars, and a quiet hope stirred, a belief that steady hands and patient hearts could carve a space for trust and companionship. Sarah returned inside, letting sleep claim her, the cabin and the land breathing together in a slow, measured rhythm, promising the dawn of another day. Dawn broke over the Nebraska plains, soft light spilling across the garden and fences. Sarah rose early, feeling the cool touch of morning air on her skin as she moved through the cabin, tending the hearth and gathering water. The world around her was waking slowly, birds tracing arcs across the sky, wind stirring the long grasses, the creek glinting with the first light. She paused for a moment, letting the quiet surround her, sensing the steady pulse of life in the land. The morning was dedicated to repairs. Sarah moved along the fences with methodical care, hammering loose posts, tightening wires, checking each section for signs of stress from wind or rain. Her hands were rough, calloused, evidence of months of solitary labor, yet precise and strong. Every strike, every adjustment was deliberate, a reflection of her commitment to this homestead and the world she had shaped. The land responded beneath her touch, steady and familiar. By mid-morning, she prepared the horse for a short ride to check the far pasture. The path wound along the creek, and she noticed subtle signs of wildlife. A deer track pressed into soft earth, a family of rabbits darting through tall grass. She allowed herself to slow, to take in the richness of the prairie life, feeling a quiet connection to all that moved and thrived around her. Each moment of observation was grounding, a reminder of the rhythm she had carved out alone, yet not isolated. Returning to the cabin, she paused to sort the seeds for spring planting. Rows of neat bundles lined the table, promising renewal and growth. Her fingers traced the packets, contemplating the work ahead. Tilling, planting, nurturing each row with careful attention. The rhythm of her hands and the earth was meditative, a silent dialogue between her and the land. Time seemed to stretch, measured in the turn of the soil, the sway of grasses outside the window, the distant call of a hawk. Afternoon brought the tasks of care for the animals. She checked the chickens, filled the water troughs, repaired a small tear in the barn wall caused by winter frost. Each action was purposeful, a testament to endurance and attention. And as she worked, the prairie sun warmed her shoulders, casting long shadows across the yard. The homestead was alive with subtle sounds: the scrape of a mule's hoof, the rustle of straw, the soft clinking of water in troughs. Evening arrived with a gentle hush. She carried her stew outside, placing it near the barn, while the sky shifted into shades of rose and lavender. The wind carried the smell of damp earth, fresh grass, and smoke from distant chimneys. She lingered, letting the day settle into memory, sensing the continuity of her work, the constancy of the land. Small comforts: the fire's glow, the quiet stars, the scent of wood smoke, filled her with a soft, persistent hope. Night fell with a slow cadence, the prairie breathing beneath the moon. Sarah moved through the cabin, tending the hearth and gathering the tools for the morning. She paused to glance outside at the pale creek, the darkened groves, the fences stretching toward the horizon. A quiet anticipation stirred within her, a sense that the rhythm she had built could now hold something more. Something tentative, unfolding, a presence that might arrive on steady hooves, in patient hands. She settled near the window, the lantern casting soft circles of light on the wooden floor. Thoughts of connection, trust, and the quiet possibility of companionship lingered as she traced the familiar patterns of the land. Outside, the wind whispered, the creek murmured, and the prairie slept beneath the stars. In the stillness, she felt the promise of tomorrow, the continuation of her life. Each task and each moment, a step towards something steady and enduring. Morning arrived with a pale light filtering through the cabin windows. Sarah rose, her body already attuned to the rhythm of chores and land. She fed the animals, checked the fences, and tended the garden, moving with a quiet efficiency that reflected months of solitary discipline. Each motion carried intention, yet beneath it lay a soft anticipation, an awareness that today might carry something beyond routine. She saddled her horse and rode along the distant ridges, the breeze carrying scents of damp earth and blooming wildflowers. The prairie stretched endlessly, gold and green, dotted with groves and distant hills. Her eyes scanned the horizon for signs of wildlife or weather, yet she found her thoughts drifting, considering what a new presence, someone steady, reliable, might mean for the life she had built alone. Returning by midday, she discovered small disruptions along the fence line, evidence of wind or perhaps a wandering animal. She worked deliberately to mend the breaches, her hands steady, her mind focused. The sun climbed high, warming her shoulders and highlighting the texture of the soil and the worn boards of the barn. The land was alive in its details: the scratch of hooves, the gentle sway of grasses, the quiet hum of insects. After lunch, she walked toward the creek, carrying a small basket to gather herbs and wild greens. The water glinted, birds called overhead, and she let herself pause, listening to the rhythm of the prairie. Her movements were careful, mindful, each step measured yet unhurried. Even in solitude, the land offered companionship, its patterns and cycles familiar, comforting. By afternoon, she focused on indoor tasks. She repaired a door hinge, sorted seeds for future planting, and mended worn tools. The cabin felt alive with her work, the sense of wood, earth, and simple meals mingling in the air. There was a quiet satisfaction in each accomplishment, a sense that her life, though simple, was deliberate and full. As evening approached, the sky shifted from gold to lavender, and she carried her work outside, setting tools aside to watch the horizon. The wind whispered through the grasses, the creek mirrored the sky, and a sense of calm settled over the land. She allowed herself a rare moment to breathe fully, aware that the routine she had mastered could now coexist with the possibility of something more. Night descended gently, Lanterns glowed within the cabin, casting soft shadows across the floor. Sarah paused by the window, listening to the subtle sounds of the prairie, the rustle of the mule, the call of a distant owl, the soft movement of trees. She felt the promise of new beginnings, the quiet potential for companionship that would not disturb the rhythm of her life, but add depth, warmth, and steadiness. The fire crackled as she moved through her evening tasks. She arranged tools, checked on the animals, and set out materials for the next day. Each action was small, deliberate, yet held a sense of anticipation. Outside, the land rested, the horizon softened under moonlight, and Sarah felt the quiet, patient presence of the prairie echo within her, a reflection of what she hoped to welcome into her life: trust, steadiness, and the possibility of shared days. Dawn broke over the rolling hills, pale gold light spilling across the prairie. Sarah moved through the cabin with quiet purpose, tending animals and checking the fences, the air crisp and alive. The rhythm of morning settled over her, familiar and grounding. Each task she completed felt like part of a larger whole, a life she had built with careful hands and quiet determination. Today carried a subtle weight of change, a promise in the wind that the solitude she had relied on was opening to shared moments and trust. She rode along the ridge, the wide landscape stretching beneath her. The creek reflected the soft morning sun, and the wind carried the scent of damp earth and wildflowers. Her horse stepped carefully over uneven ground, and she let herself breathe in the stillness. Every hill, every tree felt alive, as if the land itself acknowledged the presence of someone who had tended it so faithfully. Back at the cabin, she worked in the garden, checking the plants and ensuring the soil was rich and secure. Her hands moved with practiced ease, each motion deliberate and steady. The garden flourished under her care, the work a reflection of resilience, patience, and careful planning. Later, she repaired fences, adjusted boards, and straightened tools, the routine grounding her as the sun climbed higher. She allowed herself a moment to feel the quiet anticipation of the upcoming barn dance in town, a small reminder of life beyond the homestead. Evening arrived with lanterns strung along the barn and yard, casting a warm glow across the space. The music began, the sound of fiddles and laughter spilling through the open doors. Sarah entered, careful yet curious, moving with a steady sense of confidence. The presence beside her, steady and unassuming, offered comfort and quiet support. Each step across the floor was measured, but full of warmth and trust, a reflection of the bond that had grown quietly over days and weeks. The night passed with simple joys, shared dances, quiet smiles, and the awareness of connection without grand declarations. Outside, the prairie rested under the moonlight, the wind rustling the grass with soft whispers. Back at the cabin, she completed the final chores and secured the doors, the calm in her chest reflecting the life she had nurtured. She paused at the window, looking at the stars above, letting the stillness remind her of how far she had come. Weeks turned to months, and the land, animals, and home thrived. Each day carried a rhythm of work and quiet joys. Meals were shared, fences repaired together, and chores became moments of connection. Seasons changed, bringing rain and sun, snow and thaw, yet the life they had built remained steady, resilient, and full of small wonders. One early spring morning, a soft cry echoed across the cabin. A small child, new life entering their world. Sarah and her companion exchanged a quiet look, a mutual understanding passing between them. They had created something enduring, a home
and a bond that required no grand gestures, only shared days, patience, and trust. The prairie stretched around them, alive with wind and light, carrying the promise of future seasons. Together, they watched the sun climb over the hills, knowing the life they had built was steady, honest, and filled with quiet love. The past had left its traces, but it no longer held them. Their days would continue, full of work, laughter, and the warmth of shared moments. Subscribe to Dust and Devotion Tales to follow more stories of resilience, love, and life on the frontier.